What's going on, everybody? It is Joe. Welcome to the channel today. I'm excited to have you guys here. Today we are going to be going over Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin over the years compared to the dollar, and why I think it's so telling on how valuable Bitcoin is going to become. I know with this dip, a lot of people are freaking out. A lot of people, well, some people are losing faith in Bitcoin, and then a lot of people who weren't in crypto are just getting put away from all crypto related things because they see how volatile it is and they don't want anything to do with it. But when you take that step back and you look at the big picture, and then when you compare it to the dollar, you can see a completely different perspective that I think will change a lot of people's minds. So stay tuned until the end of the video as I go through some of these examples, comparing the two. And before we dive into the price, if you guys could just like the video, please hit that bell notification and subscribe if you want to see more videos. And then please comment below. That would mean the world to me. So with that being said, let's dive right in. We have the price of Bitcoin today, 84,000, hovering right around the same as it was yesterday. And it's just great to see it back above 80,000 again. For a little bit there, it dipped below 80,000, touched 78,000 for a little bit. So to see it back above 80, get to that point where it was yesterday, around 84, 85, that's super encouraging. Fear and greed index was at 21. It's at 16 on Binance. It was 10 yesterday, so that's improving slightly. That's good to see. But that being said, I still think this is such a good buying opportunity for Bitcoin, and it's an opportunity that the market is allowing people to buy more for less. Like, it was above $100,000 for a while, and now there's the opportunity for people to get more Bitcoin for less before it gets back to those points. This isn't financial advice, but historically, when you see these dips, it comes back up. And so taking advantage of these price dips, especially with these low RSI levels, is such a good opportunity that oftentimes people beg that they wish they got in on, but then they don't because they're scared with that fear index, for example, and they don't get in until it's too late, and then they just bought way less for the same amount of money. So just keep that in mind. Not financial advice, but with that being said, I kind of want to dive into a couple of news things first before we get into comparing the dollar to Bitcoin. So first, we have BlackRock adds its I Bet Bitcoin ETF to alternative asset model portfolio. The world's biggest asset manager added 1% to 2% allocation to its target allocation portfolios. I'm not going to go all the way into this article, but do want to share a little bit. So BlackRock has added 1% to 2% allocation of the iShares Bitcoin Trust IBIT to its model portfolio that allows for alternative assets. This marks the first time BlackRock has included IBIT in any of its models, a move that could signal broader institutional adoption of Bitcoin. BlackRock's model portfolios manage around $130 billion, and while this is a smaller allocation, it could influence advisors and platforms that follow these models. So that's a big move by BlackRock, very encouraging for Bitcoin, and I think it's going to set the stage for other advisors, other platforms to follow those models, to follow BlackRock's lead, because BlackRock kind of sets the tone, sets the lead for everything else when it comes to finance. So to see them do this, and it's the first time that it's happened with them, that's a big step forward and a step in the right direction that leaves me feeling optimistic and bullish. With that, President Trump, the Trump Organization, has filed a trademark for Trump with plans to launch a metaverse and NFT trading platform. Trump is pro-crypto. This is just yet another crypto-related thing that the Trump administration, the Trump Organization, has released that shows that it is on their minds. They are thinking about crypto. They are working behind the scenes on coming up with different things when it comes to crypto. So don't take that lightly. Like, the President of the United States is talking about crypto, is talking about Bitcoin, is talking about XRP. He is talking about these crypto-related things, and he is saying it in front of all of us. And so those things do matter, and knowing that they're working on these things is super encouraging, and I just don't want you guys to be looking back at this in 3 years and think to yourself, why wasn't I looking at these signs, why wasn't I paying attention to this? All the signs were there when I do feel like the signs are right there. So just keep that in mind. Don't take anything Trump says lightly. He is the president of the United States. He has a lot of power when it comes to these things. And even though we've seen a slight dip so far under his presidency, I do feel like good times are ahead and the stage is set. That said, now we have this, spending dollars to save Bitcoin. This is one of the examples that I was talking about, and so just take a listen to this a second.
Today for the Bitcoin Investors Conference. You'll be on several panels later today. I understand last night you bought drinks at a Bitcoin-themed pub key bar. But listen, you paid in cash. Why? How about Bitcoin?
Well, because I spend dollars and save Bitcoin.
I love that response so much. I spend dollars and save Bitcoin. A lot of people always will ask, like, oh, why can't you buy these things with Bitcoin? It's like, I don't want to buy it with Bitcoin. I want to buy it with cash. Like, when you compare cash to Bitcoin, I'm going to choose to use my cash and not Bitcoin. So I kind of like that answer a lot.
Bitcoin is an asset that's growing in value, and I know it's volatile. Its short-term volatility has been in existence since it has been in existence. But in the long term, it's growing in value, where the US dollar is by design debasing. Every year, the Fed has it designed so it inflates 2% or more. They try to keep it around 2%, but they can't. And so the US dollar is always declining by design.
So the US dollar is declining by design, at least 2% a year. That's their goal, to keep it to 2%, but we all know inflation's more than 2%, and it's designed that way. So when you compare the two, why would you want dollars and not Bitcoin?
Yeah. And so the scarcity of Bitcoin, the fact that 21 million will only exist in all of time, gives it that certainty, that stability, that scarcity in the long run. And there will be short-term volatility, but over time, as it becomes more ubiquitous, it will become more stable and more valuable.
So that's kind of what I've been saying for a while. The short term, there is going to be that volatility. You are going to see those ups and downs while everyone's figuring things out, while the regulations are getting figured out. Like, that volatility is expected, but like she was saying, in the long run, when you zoom out, that's when you can see something that when you compare it to the dollar, is just going to provide so much more value. So I found that super interesting. Next up, we have Zuby, and I found this interview. It's a few minutes long, so bear with me. I would encourage you guys to listen to the whole thing because it's really good and puts a good perspective on this concept as well. So take a listen here to what he has to say. He's got over 1 million followers, is very well known, and he has a pretty good thought process when it comes to this topic.
I mean, I think it's the best form of money that exists in terms of what money is actually supposed to do and supposed to be. All fiat currencies are, I mean, they're all junk. They're programmed to go to zero. Every fiat currency in history has trended towards zero, and they all do. Doesn't matter if it's the pound, like the pound, the dollar, the euro, the Swiss franc. Those are literally the best ones that exist.
Sure.
And how much are they worth now compared to what they were worth 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago? My dad is a medical doctor. His annual salary when he first moved to the UK was £4,000 a year.
Wow.
So if you want to understand the scale of inflation, you think that you could feed a family. As a doctor, a good salary was £4,000 a year as recently as the 70s. And now, I mean, even if you were a doctor at that same level making 40,000, that wouldn't be enough. So people massively underestimate just how ravaging inflation is. It's almost taken for granted because people don't know any different that your money is just going to lose purchasing power over time, because that's how it's been since going off of gold standards. That's all anyone really knows. It's just assumed. Yeah.
Your money is losing so much purchasing power over the years. Thinking about what you could buy back then for prices compared to what you can buy now, people just overlook that fact. Like, your money is worth so much less now, and it takes so much more to buy the same things.
A house now that costs £500,000 Some years down the line, it'll be 600,000. Then it'll be 700,000. And our brains think, oh, the house is gaining in value. Really, no. Your pound is losing value. Your dollar is losing value. Your euro is losing value. So Bitcoin flips all that on its head. It totally changes the game. And most people don't understand that. Even most people who have heard of Bitcoin, even probably most people who own it, don't really understand what they're holding. I think it's the equivalent. When you talk to older generations, and they talk about buying houses for like £5,000 or £8,000 or $10,000 or whatever, and we're just like, oh my gosh, that sounds completely crazy. I think when people tell their children, let alone their grandchildren, a few decades from now, that they were able to buy Bitcoin for under $1 million, let alone under 100,000, let alone under 10,000.
That's such a good way of thinking about it. Like, you hear that all the time from the older generation talking about, oh, this was only this much money back then. Oh, this was only this. Oh, I made this much money, or I got this for a house for this price. And it's like, is Bitcoin our generation, like this current generation that we're in, is this that opportunity for everyone right now to have that same opportunity so a couple of generations behind us, that they're hearing these stories from us, like, hey, I bought Bitcoin under $1 million. Hey, I bought Bitcoin under 100,000. Hey, I bought Bitcoin under $50,000. Like, could this be that opportunity for us? And I just think there are so many signs that this is going to be that opportunity. So when you zoom out, the recent dip from 108,000 to 80,000, like, if you believe in Bitcoin, you believe in the use cases, that's such a little amount in the grand scheme of things. And if you're holding and looking at that long-term value, that's it doesn't matter if you're dollar cost averaging or you're just playing the long game and thinking like Zuby. That's the way you can make life-changing amounts of money potentially.
Let alone under 1,000 in their lifetime, their minds are going to be equally, if not more, blown.
Yeah. I do see social media pop-ups that Bitcoin is like buying a property in the 1940s.
Yeah, basically.
Same kind of thing.
Beachfront property.
Yeah.
In Manhattan.
Yeah.
Which doesn't exist, but yeah.
No, I didn't know whether.
So I found that very interesting. Curious to know what your guys' thoughts are. Like, if someone said, like, say a house was, let's say Bitcoin was at 90,000. So say your house was worth $360,000 right now. And someone's like, hey, in 5 years, I will give you 4 Bitcoin for your house, but you have to sign right now. Would you accept that offer? Your house might go up to 400,000, 450,000. It might go down a little bit, but would you accept 4 Bitcoin 5 years from now for that house? And you're like, hey, I'm not going to see that money until then, but in 5 years, I'll give you 4 Bitcoin for that $360,000 house. Would you say yes or no? I'm curious to know your comments below. I think he brings up a lot of good points, and like, this could be one of those opportunities where you're telling the generation below you, 2 generations below you, like, hey, you would never believe what I bought Bitcoin at back when I was a kid, or back when I was middle-aged, or whatever it is. Like, you wouldn't believe it, and the kids maybe someday will be like, no way, like, it's 13 million now, and you got it for what? Like, could that be a possibility? I like to think so. And then you have Michael Saylor, for example, like, hey, sell a kidney if you must, but keep the Bitcoin. Like, sell whatever else you can right now. This is such a good buying opportunity, but keep your Bitcoin. And I don't know if I'm going to be selling my kidney, but he brings up a good point. Like, if you needed some money right now for something that came up, would you sell other assets that you have? Would you reach into your savings or some stock account or whatever it might be to fund that? Or would you take out Bitcoin? Like, what would you choose? I feel like I'm going to keep my Bitcoin safe, and I'm going to reach into my savings. I'm going to try and sell some things around the house or work even harder that day at work to try and get that money so I don't have to sell Bitcoin because of the future value that I think Bitcoin's going to get to. And that's what Michael Saylor is saying here. And then going off that house example again, I bought this house January 7, 2020 for $30,000. Bitcoin was $82. That's a pretty cheap house. But Bitcoin was 8,200 that day. 30,000 would have got me 3.65 Bitcoin. 3.65 Bitcoin is worth $346,000 now. This was probably a rental flip house because it talks about real estate and maintenance fees and all of that. But it brings up the same point, like how many Bitcoins it would take to buy that. It would have cost 3.65 Bitcoin to buy that house back then. Today, that 3.65 Bitcoin would buy a $346,000 house. Would you think that that $30,000 house back in 2020 is worth $350,000 now? I don't think it went up that much. Just my take. So Bitcoin value going up, dollar value going down. Another example with that, life gets cheaper with Bitcoin. In 2012, it took 50,000 Bitcoin to buy a house. In 2016, it dropped to 697 Bitcoin. By 2020, just 46 Bitcoin was enough. Now in 2024, only 5 Bitcoin is needed to buy a house. This highlights Bitcoin's purchasing power growing exponentially as its price increases. What once cost thousands of Bitcoin now costs just a few. So look at this. 50,000 to 700 to 46 to 5, and that's in 4-year increments. What's it going to look like in 2028? Is it only going to be 1 Bitcoin? Is it going to be less than 1 Bitcoin? Based on this trend, it's going to be less than 5, you would guess, and that is crazy. That means the purchasing power of Bitcoin is rising dramatically, while the purchasing power of the dollar in comparison is dropping. And so when you zoom out, when you look at the big picture, when you compare Bitcoin to the dollar and what you would rather hold, and you look at the history of the two and how they're trending, how you're needing less and less Bitcoin to buy things and more dollars to buy things, I just think this is such a good buying opportunity right now for it, and the market is giving us these chances with this big dip to take advantage of it, to potentially accumulate more Bitcoin, so someday, somehow, we're able to pass down the story to future generations saying, hey, I bought Bitcoin for under $100,000. You wouldn't believe it. So this is not financial advice, but I just wanted to kind of go over this comparison with you from Bitcoin to the dollar, kind of how, and like the purchasing power behind it. I thought those videos were super helpful for me in understanding that, so hopefully they were helpful for you. Again, if you did find that helpful, please like the video, please comment below and give me your thoughts, and if you subscribe, that would mean the world to me if you want more videos in the future. So again, give me your thoughts below, and until then, I will see you next time.